I'm pushing the button to go live, so it'll be about 4 or 5 seconds.
Ms. Richardson, can you hear us okay?
Oh, no, she can't. Yeah, no.
Okay.
Now she can.
Ms. Richardson, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can now.
Okay. Okay. All right. I will call to order the public hearing on the tax rates for the 2021-2022 year. And we have allowed the public to submit comments by email leading up to this tax hearing to try and be a little bit friendlier during the pandemic. And then we've also allowed for public attendance. And we have 2 people, well, actually, perhaps 3, signed up for public comment. So, Mr. and Mrs. Day? I'm sorry, the public hearing is prior to the board meeting. The agenda tonight is just the one topic. So we have the public hearing prior to, and then we adjourn from that public hearing and go into our regularly scheduled meeting. No, the question is, are we going to have any discussion during the public hearing? And no, the public hearing is just a time for the public to address the board prior to the board acting. No, there is not. The public hearing prior to the board meeting is the opportunity for public comment. The question is, if we want responses, why wouldn't we allow the community to kind of interact? And this forum is been set this way for years and years and is the same for each tax district within the county. We have the public hearings, it's set by statute, and then we go into our board meeting. Would you like us to move on to the next comment? Do you know the
I
answer to
think
that?
you could move to the next individual that you have to speak, and she could, as
Okay.
long as it's during the public hearing.
All right, we will come back to you.
Madam
then.
Chair,
Yes.
can you let me know what the question was? I couldn't hear it. I apologize.
She asked if, Ms. Day asked if we could come back to her after the second public comment, and that's fine, we will do that. So the second public comment is by Phil Butner. Mr. Butner, or Bittner? Thank you. I apologize.
I'm on record. I just want to tell you that I'm opposed to another tax increase. Y'all have increased taxes every year. This board, maybe not you individually, but members of this board have, they pushed for the nickel tax. And after that got shot down by the people of Woodford County. This board decided to take their loophole and take the 4% or 4-cent tax anyway, and you've been doing it ever since. If you don't even raise the tax according to the hearing in the Woodford Sun, you're already going to increase your revenue just based on property values going up. Property value goes up in this county every year, which increases your revenue. There's no need to add more tax on. You're at 69.8 cents, now you want 71 cents. The school already takes over 65% of the property tax that we pay comes here to this school board, to this community for that. I think that's enough. I think you can end with the further taxes and just keep it the same and take what you get. It's going to go up with property taxes, bring in more businesses. You got a brand new subdivision going in out there, that's going to increase revenue for you guys. Take that and be satisfied. We all live on budgets. There's people with fixed incomes in this community that don't have an opportunity to go outside and make more money to make up for the taxes that you all are charging. So I would say, I'm going to give people a break. COVID or no COVID, all this stuff, say no. Do with what you got, work within your budget. I have to live within a budget. If I want something, I've got to save for it. I've got to wait for it. till I have the money to do it. You keep taking more money out of my pocket. I can't just go, you know, if I was a business, I'd have to go charge somebody else now to cover the revenue, because if a business is for profit and you keep taking money from them, they're gonna force it back on the community, on the consumer. That's the one that's paying for it. The mom and dad, the single moms out here, the single parents, the families that are working hard, it's all on them. So I'd say consider that, and I say no to the new tax.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you coming tonight and appreciate your time. Ms. Day.
I don't have prepared comments. I guess I'm going to be an extemporaneous public speaker, but I certainly will agree and piggyback on what my neighbor has said down Troy Pike. I'm concerned about the lack of budgeting within this school board that is made public to the taxpayers. I don't feel like we are being included in all of the numbers that are being generated. I know Mr. Martello does a great job, and I feel like the information may get to the board, but I don't think it gets further out. Mrs. Bradley, my husband and I had a conversation about 2 weeks ago, and she stated that our budgeting was going to be done with Mr. Martello, Mr. Atkins were working on it. We had talked about this when Mr. Hawkins was here back at an April or a May board meeting that I watched virtually. Nothing's been done. The board members asked, I'm not sure which ones exactly, the board members asked to be informed about how the budgeting process was done. And so that has been discussed, but have the five of you all actually met and looked at the budget with Mr. Martello and now Mr. Atkins and said, this is what we're spending our money on? I want to know what you're going to do with this tax increase. You just got $7 million from the federal government. We've been in the red several years. When we were talking, my husband lied to Ms. Bradley, we were talking about the $350,000 that's coming out of the general fund to build this new high school. That's going to be part of the payment from it. It's hard to talk behind a mask, you all know that. So where are the cuts going to come from? $350,000 does not show up at your doorstep. Mrs. Bradley said to me, I'm sure we can find it in our budget. I'm sure we can take out $350,000. But where? Are you going to cut programs? Are you going to cut teachers? Are you going to cut counselors? What are you going to cut? And I think our community deserves to know that. So where are you going to spend this tax increase? Where is that money going to go, and how is it going to benefit our children? At the last board meeting, Ms. McHale brought up the fact that we're not spending any money on our buildings. Our buildings are falling in. Yes, we absolutely need a new high school, but we can't let the facilities that we have now go. That needs to be in your budget. We're not hearing that. So there's a lot of information that all of you all, I guess, are getting. I don't know. But the taxpayer needs to hear some of that, and we need to know how our taxes are being spent. I don't know how much you pay. I pay quite a bit. There's a lot of big taxpayers here in Woodford County, and they expect some accountability. And the thing that they do not want to see, nor do the other people who are paying taxes, they don't want to know that this money is going to be taxed, we're going to be taxed more, without knowing where these funds are going. The Woodford County Fiscal Court, the For Sale City Government of Midway, they took no tax increase this year. We have families that are suffering due to the pandemic. Do we really need a tax increase? If so, show us.
Thank you, Ms. Day. I appreciate you coming, appreciate you taking the time. All right, we will leave it open for 5 more minutes to allow anybody that might be running late to come and give their comments. Usually we do 10 or 15 minutes, but with allowing for public comment submission beforehand, I think we can probably do 5.
Ms. Bradley, how much time do we have left?
3 minutes.
That was a long 2 minutes.
It is a long 2 minutes in a completely silent meeting room.
It's okay.
All right, we'll give it 1 more minute. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn from the public hearing?
So moved.
There's a motion by Ms. Springate. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a second by Ms. McHale. All those in favor of adjourning from the public hearing, say aye. Aye. The motion passes 5-0. All right, we will now call to order the special board meeting on September 22nd, 2021, via via teleconference. Let the minutes show that all board members are present, 4 in person and 1 virtual.
I do have a quick question before we get started. I didn't notice that the meeting was listed as a video conference, and I just wanted to double check that. Where was it listed that way?
I may have misspoken.
Okay. I just
And
wanted to
there's
double
always
check.
been a mechanism for board members to attend virtually to regular meetings, so. Okay, so we will move on to our regular agenda. Item A is to adopt fiscal year 2022 tax rates. The tax rate options have been presented to the board and have been advertised in the newspaper accordingly and on our different websites and Facebook pages. Is there a motion to set a tax rate?
I'll move to keep our tax rate the same at 69.8.
Okay, Ms. McHale has made a motion to adopt the flat tax rate, which keeps our tax rate the same at 69.8. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second by Ms. Richardson.
Did you hear me?
Yeah, I was good. Your audio's great. And we'll move on to discussion. Is there any discussion on this?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I would just like to say, just an important kind of comment, that I think that it would speak volumes from this board who has raised the tax rates in previous years in a time of need when our community is suffering. We've had COVID restrictions. We've had businesses who have been shut down, parents who have had to quit their jobs. I think that it is important for us to recognize that as a board, that our community needs for us to listen to what they've said for the last few years. So I think that it's time for us this year to sit where we're at, do what we can with what we have. Our community has experienced a crunch time, and I think it's time for our board to do the same.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Richardson. Mr. Atkins, would you like to weigh in on this?
Well, I would just like to say that keeping the tax rate flat is really good with me, because I do feel the same way that we have these, these folks in our community that are struggling. We've seen it across the state of Kentucky. We've seen it across our nation. COVID has really put us in a really bad situation as far as folks trying to maintain employment, trying to gain employment, and those types of things. Now, to Ms. Day's point, I have inherited a couple of years of budget being in the red, and it would have been nice to had extra revenue to try to help offset that. But I can assure you that we will work through that. We will keep our tax rate flat, and we will get the budget to where it's not in the red. And actually, when we say it's in the red, we're only meaning year by year. The district's still carrying forward anywhere between $6.5 and $8 million a year. So we're in pretty good shape. We really are. So I do appreciate this board, if that's what they choose to do, to stay with the flat rate.
All right, thank you, Mr. Adkins. Are there any other comments?
I do want to just clarify, keeping the rate flat at 69.8 cents actually generates, according to Mr. Martello's estimates, around $660,000. So keeping it flat, we're still getting well over $500,000.
Yeah, and that really takes care of our $350,000 that we're talking about taking out of our general fund for restricted monies for the building. So it really almost doubles what we were looking at taking out.
Well, really, if you look at what we're taking out is the $350,000 restriction, and we've done that now. This will be the fourth year, I believe, third or fourth year.
Third.
And we're also taking out an additional almost $300,000 in capital outlay. So the total cost of the restriction for the new high school is $650,000 from the general fund. And so I do believe that and I really appreciate the public comments. I really do thank you guys for coming and speaking up. And I do think that there were some real valid points there. And it's really well past time that we all sat down and really took a hard look at the budget and set our priorities. Once we set our priorities, then to make sure that we're budgeting towards those priorities. And I know that's something, Mr. Atkins, you had said you wanted
Absolutely.
to do, when
But
you
again, our
came,
priority has to be to get this budget year out of the red, okay? So, and we're working towards that. So with this extra increase in funds that we're getting with keeping the rate flat,
Absolutely.
like I said, that completely offsets from here on out.
Restriction is closer to $650,000.
That's not
because
correct.
280 in capital outlay.
That's not a
300
general fund money, though.
300 and the capital outlay, when we use those funds, to Ms. Day's point, capital outlay funds come to our district an allocation per student. And those capital outlay funds are used for facilities. They're used for new roofs when the roof is 26, 27 years old. They're used for ventilation systems so that kids aren't as sick. They're used for repairs that we have not been doing because we have to do that out of general fund expenses. So when we don't use our capital outlay for repairs, we have to use general fund for those expenses. So really, if you look at the total amount restricted, that's closer to the $650,000. And again, we did get almost $7 million in federal funds, so that should help offset some things too. So I do think that, to Ms. Day's point, now really is a good time for us to take a look at our budget and to come up with our priorities, and then to look line by line, because we have that wonderful spreadsheet that Amy Smith and Mr. Hawkins gave us that really details exactly what our expenses are. And
How long
so,
ago would that have been, Ms. Springate? Amy Smith's been out of the district for a year, am I correct?
Yes,
More than.
So you're talking about expenses that occurred a year and a half ago.
Well, I'm talking about programs,
These
so we have
things are
certain,
something that we have to address now.
well, we
We
have,
can't go back to a year and a half ago and start trying to fix issues then.
well, correct, but I would be happy to see an expense sheet now with updated figures. So it lists things like computers, books, just all of the expenses that we do as a district. And so that was a list that just shows all of our expenses. Some of those programs we may not have now, but I think
Is all
the
that not in the
majority-
budget, Mr. Martello? Is all that stuff not identified in the budget that we approve every year?
Yes, sir. So when
I thought so.
When we speak to the budgeting process, you know, we have three instances when we look at those things throughout the year. We've got the January, when you have a draft, you've got the tentative in May, and then here in the coming weeks, you'll have a working to adopt it in September. So those conversations happen at a minimum 3 times a year. Yes, I do know to the worksheet that you speak of, that was in January or February, don't quote me, or March of 2021. So it would have been back, like Mr. Atkins refers to, over 18 months ago. So it's a little dated at this point. Per Mr. Atkins' direction, I'm happy to update that spreadsheet
Absolutely.
and get some up-to-date numbers for you, coinciding with the September budget. But we do look at it at least a minimum of 3 times a year and have those
As
discussions.
a board, right?
In public,
As
yes.
a board,
In
as a
public,
public,
yeah.
and have that dialogue.
And to be clear, what we're looking at is high-level numbers. We're not looking at what we're spending on summer school. We're not looking at what we're spending on each
I think
and
you
every.
received that information
Each,
just
but we're
last
not
week.
looking at that in a budgeting session where we're setting priorities. Receiving a high-level draft budget with tentative numbers in January does not equate to going line by line of what programs we have in Woodford County, what we are spending our money on in Woodford County,
I may be
where we might be
completely
able
wrong,
to
but I'm
look
not
at
sure that that's
different.
the board's duty, other than just to.
Well,
just
that
to-
is absolutely what Ms. Smith and Mr. Hawkins provided us, and I think that
I
was
think-
at the request of the board with the insistence and involvement of the attorney. So I would like to go through that, because to Ms. Day's point, the public is not aware of any of this information, and us having those high-level discussions, the draft budget is attached in January. People can go back and look at that. That does not tell you what your priorities are. That does not tell you where you are spending each and every month. And it does not, equate to being fully transparent to the public. There are a lot of different line items that Ms. Smith was able to do. And if you could update that, that would be wonderful. And if we could all sit down and talk about priorities, that would be wonderful. Because again, to Ms. Day's point, that has not happened in the view of the public. And I'm not even clear about each and every line item at this point. So that would be
I
wonderful.
would again like to make clear that I started the job in July. And I would appreciate that I be held to the standards that everybody else has been. Give me the same opportunities. So if that's not happened in 18 months, give me a chance to do it.
I would
all I
love
ask.
that. I appreciate that
That's all
very
I ask.
much. Yes, I appreciate that.
Give
Thank
me
you.
that opportunity.
All right. Ms. McHale, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I think, when I look at the budget this year and I look at the tax rates for this year, I think that maybe saying it a little differently than Ms. Springate said, we have a restriction of 350. The effect of that restriction is more than 350 on the operating budget. And I do think that's something that we need to take into consideration. We also have some other items in the budget for salary increases and other things that we absolutely need that 660 to cover that. I don't believe that we'll end up in the black by any means, even with the 660, but I think it's much more doable, especially with some of the other cost savings that we saw this week from Mr. Martello in the way of the spraying for COVID and some other items. So I have no doubt that we'll be able to meet a budget with this flat tax rate. What I would like to talk about, though, going forward is more than just a one-year look at the budget, because we have a lot of big expenses that are going to need to be placed at certain times in the budget, and we need to understand how that's going to fall for the next few years to see what we should be doing from a tax perspective every single year. I think it's really hard to have sort of a strategic plan for an organization, which is what I view Woodford County Schools as, an organization, and just look at it in a 12-month block, only ever at a 12-month block. So I think if we can get back to the point that we're talking about a budget committee or I don't want to call it a budget committee, but I think a finance committee that looks at some of this stuff from a short-term perspective and a long-term perspective, I think we can keep the public in the know about what's coming up, what they should be expecting, and I think that would make these discussions a lot easier going forward too, if we do have to end up taking a 4% increase. I don't think there's any way that we could ever say, no, we're never going to take that increase, or we're never not going to take that increase. But I think that if we do a few things throughout the year to keep people informed, that could help a little bit too.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Glass?
Nothing really else to add other than I do agree with what they're saying. I think if we could, I know in the past we've tried to have a budget session, but I feel like it's we've kind of just glazed over everything. So if we want to be transparent and we want to kind of have a more than a 1-year plan, I think to have a deep dive into a budget session that we can really talk about line for line things, I think that will save us a lot of time and energy in the future.
Okay, thank you. I would add only that while I completely understand the notion of a long-term budget, school finance doesn't always allow for that because our funding is based on 1 year of allocation from the legislature, and there are so many changes that can happen. We can have a mid-year seat reduction. We can have any number of factors that affect our budget in ways that we couldn't ever predict. It does make it harder than a private industry or business who can forecast with more accuracy without being beholden for their funding to another level of government. That's something to keep in mind for all of us and for the tax base. I do think we need to make sure that we don't get out over our skis. I have certainly sat through 2 years worth of meetings talking about budget deficits and things like that, and this board just approved a 2% raise for the entire employee base, which was absolutely needed, but it comes at a cost of $800,000 approximately on the numbers that we have been given. If we continue to add costs without adding a revenue source, then the budget deficits that we are experiencing or looking at can only grow. So while I absolutely understand the implications of keeping the tax rate flat this year, I think we need to say as a board, yes, we acknowledge that we have spent a lot in just the last few months. If you look at the funding for the lacrosse program, which is indicated, it is a benefit to our students. But it comes with a cost, and we have to assign new revenues to new costs. So I just want to make sure that as a board, we're looking at that and keeping that in mind as we look at a plan to go forward, even beyond tonight.
And I guess when I'm talking about a strategic plan, I don't think that you need to necessarily identify revenues for everything, but to understand what you want to spend is the key to understanding and watching for cuts in seat funding and all of that other stuff. If we go into a year or we go into 2 years without really understanding what we want to do, then it just makes it that much harder.
Absolutely.
So
And
I totally
that
understand what you're saying. We can't solidify revenues at all, but we do have a really good idea of what our expenses are going to be.
And you know, to speak to that real quick, Ms. McHale, we're hoping that legislation is going to go back into a special session, and they're talking about that. And if they do, give us that opportunity to use 18-19 data again for our SEEK funding, which that would make us rock solid for this year. We know what our funding is going to be. And that would be a perfect case scenario, would allow us to keep our kids in school more, but would also give us that secure funding notion as to what we'll be able to budget on.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you all for your comments. We will now vote. I will call the roll on this one. There's a motion to keep a motion to approve the 2022 tax levy for Woodford County Public Schools is as follows. a tax level for the general fund tax levy of 69.8 cents on real property, real estate, and 69.8 cents on personal and tangible property, a motor vehicle tax rate of 50.9 cents, a watercraft tax rate of 50.9 cents, and an aircraft tax rate of 50.9 cents, a 3% gross utility tax rate. There's a motion by Ms. McHale and a second by Ms. Richardson. I will call the roll to vote. Ms. Springate?
Aye.
Ms. Springate votes aye. Ms. McHale?
Aye.
Ms. McHale votes aye. Ms. Richardson?
Aye.
Ms. Richardson votes aye. Ms. Glass?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. The tax rate is set at 69.8 cents, which is a flat tax, not increasing to our constituents. Is there a need for an executive session, Mr. Atkins?
No, ma'am.
There is not. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
There's a motion by Ms. McHale. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Glass. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion is adjourned. Thank you for coming.
Good work. And I think I can make it